What's up, everybody? Welcome to Puzzle Huddle with Experts. We have another fantastic guest, Dr. Lili Wright. She's a PhD scientist. She's an educator, STEM advocate. And you see, she already blessed me this morning. She has a puzzle in her office, which is the first time I've seen that in one of these interviews. So I'm super excited to enter into this conversation. And thank you for joining us. Dr. Wright, if you could explain to everyone what you have your PhD in, and then you, as best you can, use terms that we can all understand.
Sure. Well, Matthew, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I got my PhD in medical sciences, and excuse me, what that really just means is I'm trained to study pretty much any disease that might impact anybody. As far as my actual research, while I was earning my PhD, I earned my thesis more so towards oncology or cancer, specifically breast cancer. So what I did is I went in and I tried to figure out what makes breast cancer cells, or what makes cancer cells turn in a way where they do things that make them more aggressive. So for example, if they are located in the breast, what makes them have the properties or the ability to go somewhere else in the body, which can be really devastating for clinical outcomes. So that's what I was studying.
Yeah, now take me back to your childhood. Wow. Is there a reason why that specific topic area was important to you from your childhood, or did that kind of reveal itself as a specific topic as you kind of matured as an adult?
Well, it's really funny because as a child, I wanted to be, so I'm a reading rainbow baby of my generation. So pretty much every week I wanted to be something else, something different, whatever LeVar Burton was blessing us with that week or introducing us to. But I knew I wanted to help injured or sick people or animals or something. So I've always been curious about that. But actually the reason that I was focused on oncology is my first year in graduate school, I had 5 family members that were diagnosed with cancer, all within 1 year, on both my mom's side and my dad's side. And so I felt really overwhelmed and a little bit helpless in that space, as you know, in the caregiver, daughter, granddaughter, a niece kind of hat. And so that kind of drove me to where I wanted to pursue this degree for oncology for cancer.
Yeah, and why a PhD? Is that like a big part of the reason? Because there's lots of places where you can stop in your schooling and education path, but you kept going. So why was it important for you to get to all the way to that high level of education to support this interest?
That's a perfect question, because you're right. You can stop a lot of legs in your training and in your journey. And I actually did research all throughout undergraduate. I went to Clark Atlanta, so we were very blessed to be in an undergraduate research program. I got to work at Morehouse School of Medicine and do some hands-on training. And all of the mentoring, all of the experience and exposure that I got led me to insights of knowing that to really make an impact the way that I wanted to make an impact, I would need this advanced degree. So it was just a lot of training, mentoring, a lot of love and support that kind of pushed me towards pursuing this degree to make the impact.
Let's talk about Clark Atlanta, because I'm a big supporter of HBCU education. Well, what are some of your favorite memories from your Clark Atlanta time?
Oh my goodness. So it's so ironic. So last week I was vacationing, and I was vacationing with 2 of my best friends from Clark Atlanta. We went out the country together as families and everything. And so I think just building relationships, building those lifelong friendships that you just never know when you're sitting in the dorm room, like playing spades or studying together. You just don't know what that really means when you're sitting in it. And so that was amazing, building relationships, being in Atlanta. I'm from the South, but I'm from more suburban and rural areas. So being in the A was pretty much amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Now we got to college, but I want to get back to your childhood. What might have been some of your, not that you're a PhD scientist, what may have been some of your favorite toys as a child?
Sure. Well, ironically, I loved doing puzzles. So I mean, I'm not even trying to like joke or anything. I love doing puzzles. It's weird. I liked to make things as a kid. So I would like to make my own dolls. I was that kid in the backyard, like
Wait,
finding pine straw and like wrapping it up and making the doll's hair and twigs and sticks. So I always liked to create what I played with. I was a cardboard box kid of like, people saw a cardboard box. I saw a castle. I saw like a house. So I love to decorate. But that's kind of how I was.
that brings up something else into my thinking. You have STEM education, but there's a lot of advocates for the art part that would make that from STEM to STEAM. What and that's a great example of how art may have showed up in your development. What other ways did art show up in your life, if at all, or is that the only example?
No, no, that's a beautiful question because actually my sister is an artist. She's a trained artist. She's always been gifted at that. So several years ago, she got the Puzzle Huddle artist art
Oh,
box. I made to send her, made sure to send her that. But we've always celebrated art in our household. So um, I think when you get to see a cell under a microscope, the first time I saw it, I like started to cry. You can tell I'm already a kind of animated person, but I started to cry in the lab because I thought, man, I've been reading about being fearfully and wonderfully made, and I get to see it like on a microscopic level. It's nothing more beautiful than to see the structure of the structure of life. And so I've always tried to like celebrate and just pause from I don't think that there's a clear division between science and art. I really do think that they are quite overlapping in a lot of spaces. So
were you always in the science? Is this kind of typical of your whole lifetime, that from childhood to adolescence, and that the science was always intriguing to you?
oh yeah. I, my parents said I was always like a tinkerer. Like I always was like, I had a lot of questions. I was that kid of why, like, and my parents actually got me these books of, they were called Tell Me Why or something like that. And so I had to learn about rainbows, and I got a chance to learn about what makes a rainbow and what makes clouds. And so I always like love to understand the science or the reasoning behind what we're seeing in this life we're experiencing. So always been that way.
Now I'm going to jump forward, but I'm probably going to end up running back to something else from your childhood. But take me to your PhD work. So as best you can in terms of, I don't know if kindergarten terms are going to be able to help unpack it, but with whatever grade school words you can use to explain your PhD research. Can you explain that to me?
Sure, sure. So a lot of times we'll have most people will have normal, healthy cells, right? If you look at my cheek, these are all made of skin cells, right? They look normal, they're okay. But what happens with cancer is that cancer cells start to change their DNA. Is the DNA a okay word?
Yeah, I'm thinking reading rainbow words, but you I'm tracking with you.
Okay, okay. So our DNA, think about DNA as kind of like a code that's in all of our cells, and it tells the cell, it's like the instruction code to tell the cell what to be. So it says, hey, you're a skin cell, you're going to divide, you're going to keep being a skin cell. Well, with cancer, you get these mutations into your DNA to where you might look like a skin cell, you might even behave like a skin cell, but over time, if you keep getting more and more mutations, you're going to change in a way that's not helpful as a skin cell anymore. And so really that's kind of what cancer is. So my PhD work was looking again at like breast cancer,
Mhm.
looking at how those cancer cells, you know, a breast cell should be in one part of the body, right? But what's really damaging for patients is when that cancer goes somewhere else in the body. And so I was really trying to figure out how are those cancer cells changing their DNA in a way, getting those mutations in a way to give them the ability to go other places in the body. And so I used breast cancer cells, I used animal models, I used a lot of different strategies and tools and models. We call them preclinical models to try to answer that question. And we came up with a new molecule. We found a new molecule in my thesis that might be helpful in helping the cancer cells move around when they shouldn't move around.
Yeah, this is a great research path, but I know in your career, you did spend some time teaching. I don't know if you have to decide between teaching and research, but how do you process whether to stay as a researcher and like a bench scientist versus hitting the classroom and being an instructor scientist? How do you process that decision?
That's a great question. And it's not, for me, it was not an easy decision, to be very honest, because I know how much was poured into me while I was at Clark Atlanta to learn. And those were invaluable mentoring experiences. I will say when I was wearing that role as a professor, as an instructor and someone who was helping undergraduates, it was one of the most rewarding experiences ever. And it really felt good to pour into, the next generation of healthcare providers, scientists. I will say though, for me, I really liked being at the bench. And so when I had an opportunity to go back and do hands-on bench research, I kind of gravitated more towards that in this season of my career. But I still actively look for opportunities to engage with youth through a lot of civic organizations, just to make sure that they get that exposure, because really exposure is elevation. That's how I feel.
Yeah, when you teach it, when you were teaching in the college classroom, what kind of things were the most exciting topics to students? Like what could really get the classroom going?
Yeah, cancer research, because it's such a plague, and I was teaching at a historically Black college and university. So a lot of my students, we talked about diseases and medical conditions that disproportionately impacts, people within our community. So those kinds of topics, cancer, diabetes, when I really had a chance to break down what diabetes is clinically, because we have so many relatives who have it, but we really don't know, from the South, they got the sugar. Well, what does that really mean? So it was really cool to see some of those light bulbs go off of the actual biological process of what's making these diseases, and then start to think about, well, how can we fix this? So I'm hopeful and excited for the next generation coming behind us, because they're thinking.
Yeah, from some of my previous professional roles, I know a little bit about the pipeline of women in STEM, and then once you have the pipeline, then the retention of women in these careers. What have you seen work in terms of keeping those that are capable, interested, to have the education and the passion, keeping them in science versus them offboarding into something else when they had all of the academic and cerebral and the passion to do science, but for some reason life happens and they go do something else? How can we keep more women in STEM?
I think the number one thing is community, right? Really intentional community building. I mean, I don't mean like unauthentic, because sometimes you can force things within organizations and say, okay, we're going to hire a bunch of, Black women in this. But once they get into those spaces where they may be incredibly marginalized or isolated, that's not community, and that's not going to help to necessarily foster the collaboration needed to, for their careers to advance. So I think building community, and also, this might sound really trivial, but listening. A lot of times I find that once we get into spaces where we might be one of the few or the only, it's almost like our presence is enough. And so people don't want to even hear what we have to say. So it's like, well, wait a minute, you're here. You actually have thoughts. So listening and building that community, I think, are two great places to start.
What have been some of the places where you found community? I know it can happen at the place of employment, but it could also be much broader than that. Have there been any programs, initiatives, networks, what have you tapped into that you've actually found to be very practical and useful?
Well, I am a very proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. You see this?
Yeah.
Um, and beyond the beautiful element of our sorority and our sisterhood, I was at a conference. It was a virtual meeting for the National Sciences Science of Engineers, NSBE, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're connecting, and a lady was speaking, and she was like, well, I'm going to share this with my sorority. And I was like, well, hey, so we were able to connect outside of that. It's just seeing a friendly, familiar face in some of those other spaces has been really helpful. So being a part of that, but also just I'm pretty bubbly, again, pretty bubbly in my personality. So I use LinkedIn quite frequently as a tool to connect and just to say hello. If someone posts something, I'm really intentional of celebrating if a woman gets a grant, especially a woman of color, because it's so competitive. I'm like celebrating, I'm sharing to the best of my ability, because that exposure also helps with retention and helping them facilitate more opportunities. So yeah.
What kind of life, they could be recent hobbies or lifelong hobbies. Are there any things that you're really into outside of your science self? What other kind of things do you do?
That's a good question. I love reading. So what like a really fun afternoon for me will be to like go to a local bookstore, and I literally will I do the same thing. I get my tea, I get my Rice Krispie treat, and then I get a stack of like books and magazines, and I will just chill out there all day because I'm just so science focused for a big chunk of the day and the week. So it's really refreshing to read like fiction and mysteries and things like that. I've always loved reading, and I've recently started like putting down my thoughts in kind of an artistic way, in a creative way. So we'll see how that goes, but just kind of writing a little bit more has been really, really fun.
Yeah, you seem to have a theme here that this reading rainbow concept really had a profound impact on you, because it's still showing itself today. Um, so hobbies outside of school, reading, and then science is just so siloed.
Yeah.
How do you stay motivated in your work? Because you mentioned that you had an experience where you had some relatives that were diagnosed with cancer. Like, are there things like that really just keep the passion level up, so that it's about more than just a job, and it's a life's work more than it is a career or an exchange of work for a paycheck?
Absolutely. I love that you touched on that, because I believe with every, and I won't say too much, because I will get emotional when I think about this. But I believe that we're here to serve each other in whatever capacity. Uh, so when I see a patient on cycle number 24 of their chemotherapy, my own immediate family members, when I see them losing weight from their treatment, or sitting in on those doctor's visits, and they're like, well, we're going to keep trying, my family members or the patients say we're going to keep trying. I'm going to keep trying too. We get a lot of failure at the bench. We get a lot of rejection, a lot of setbacks, but just in the back of my mind, knowing that so many people are fighting, even people who haven't come to the planet yet, if there's a way that we can prevent them from having to get cancer. I also study cardiovascular disease, but if we can prevent that, it's worth it. It's I'll roll up my little sleeves and get back to the bench and keep working.
Yeah, I'm going to try to get to a bit lighter of a concept. So reading Rainbow, was there anything else from your childhood that you remember in terms of shows, media content that kind of had a lasting impression on you and may have steered your interest towards science?
Reading Rainbow, trying to think. There were a few shows on Nickelodeon. I can't even really remember what they were, but was it Double Dare or something like that, where you had to like run through a maze or something. Like, I don't know. I think just like having the opportunity to like move and grow. I'm a very like, I learn through movement. I think that's why being at the bench is so nice for me, because yeah, I like to sit and read and think, but for me to learn, I like to move. So some of those shows were really, really cool. But I'm a daughter of an educator too. So
Wow.
my yeah, my mom, shout out to my mom. She just was awarded one of the national principal awards. So she'll be honored in DC in October. But
Your mom's a teacher in the DC area?
no, she's in South Carolina, but she was selected as one, I think, of like 40 principals in the country for like the best principals in the country. I'm probably messing it up, but I'm just so proud of her. But yeah, she would practice her lessons with us when
Yeah,
we were little. So
that's what
she would
educators are.
practice, yeah, she would practice her science lessons, and like we'd be mixing colors. So those kinds of things also made an impact. Of To me, science has always been more fun than challenging. So
Yeah, I'm also the child of an educator, and what I've learned about them is they're going to teach. So there's no way to escape. It's in them to teach things. So whether it's in the classroom, at the dinner table, or in their brain says, sit everybody down and let's get a lesson in.
listen, we'd be driving and my mom would say, okay, I thought it was a game, but I realized she was trying to teach us how to read and recognize numbers on license plates and stuff. So yeah, totally resonates with me as
Yeah,
well.
that is the gift and sometimes the challenge of being raised by teachers. They don't stop. They're always turned on from that. And maybe one final thing I want to try to learn from you, and this is maybe it's going to require some imagination, because I don't know that you run a science camp for kids or have that level, that you've done education at that level. But if you were creating a science camp for kids, what kind of things do you think should be involved, or what type of activities do you think are important?
Man, I do dream about this a lot. So it's not to me like a very far-fetched imagination. That's something like one of my life's work that I'm hoping to do. And a couple big themes that would love to share with kids. One, realizing, excuse me, who's come before them,
Oh yeah.
making sure that they know about Dr. Patricia Bath, and
Mhm.
just so many pioneers and shoulders that we're standing on. Dr. Corbett, who was so instrumental in developing the COVID vaccine. Just making sure kids who look like me and you and your beautiful children, like that they see themselves in those spaces. From the science and technical themes, I would love for kids to really, really understand, kind of going back to just how fearfully and wonderfully made that we all are. So getting some microscopy experience.
Oh, you
um,
said who?
huh?
What is that word that you just used? My
Micros microscopy.
okay. This is,
Yeah,
I'll Google it.
yeah.
I'll Google it later.
No, microscope. So
Okay.
think microscope. I want and I want more kids to be able to look into a microscope, like physically look and see, what our cells look like under a
Mhm.
microscope. So those are some of the big dreams, and I don't know how, but I'm gonna figure out how to make sure some kids get to see that.
And I think you're describing that very well. If more people could realize that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, and just seeing the beauty in our composition, that is certainly inspirational to see how things stack up and line up in the shapes and the interaction of the different, the micro pieces of our existence.
It's beautiful. It's really breathtaking and it's really beautiful. And I think that if people could see that at an earlier age, they would maybe demonstrate a little more grace towards themselves. As far as, man, I think about our teenage years, those can be really tough when you look at yourself in the mirror and you may not look like, all the Instagram people, but if you saw just how amazing you were at a microscopic level, what you can't even see with the naked eye, I think people might be a little more inspired to treasure this experience.
And one more thing is coming up in my head. As you were an adolescent and you maybe showed some early interest in science, did you find a lot of support? And I'm talking about in terms of your peer group. Was it cool to be in the science, or did you find that it was, you know, less cool? Or how did you find confidence to pursue it? Or was that easy?
Adolescence, not so much, to be very honest. Being a brown girl from the South, um, not a ton of support, and I think for me that's where my HBCU experience
Yeah.
became quite pivotal for my career, because I knew I wanted to do something, but it wasn't until all of my professors looked like they could have been my aunts or my grandma or my moms, like to see them with PhDs and see them with actively thriving research labs and publications, that's when it really, for me, kind of hit in. I was like, I see myself in them, so maybe I can do this too. But it was tough being being in some of the advanced classes in STEM, science, AP, calculus and stuff like that. It was in moments very isolating, but I'm very blessed because I had a strong network in my home. So I think that's what helped me survive and thrive in that space, but it wasn't the easiest. Yeah, it wasn't the easiest.
All right. Well, you seem to have persevered, and you were able to connect with enough centers of influence and excellence and support emotionally and academically to arrive at the place that you are. And thank goodness that you're here to be a role model for the next generation and to get this research done so that we can thrive in our health and continue to have longevity. That's
I
the
got
right
you.
word.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and be
Absolutely.
vibrant in the time that we have. So thank you so much. I want to invite everyone that's watching this video to like the video and follow our channel so you can see our new videos as they come out. And Dr. Wright, thank you so much for your time today.
Matthew, thank you so much for what you're doing. Like I said, I'm not going to talk too long because I will get emotional, but just seeing your journey and seeing how you are showing up to serve a cause bigger than yourself. I'm really humbled to be a part of this, and I'm really grateful. I expect even greater things coming out of your brilliance in the future. So thank you for letting me be a part of this.
All right, we certainly hope so. All right, bye, everybody.